Afternoon. Today is October 4th, 2018. My name is Helene Tischler, and I'm here at the Newton Free Library with Mr. Robert Reed. Together, we are participating in the Newton Talks Oral History Project that is being conducted with the Newton Free Library, Historic Newton, and the Newton Senior Center. Thank you, Mr. Reed, for being here with us.
Thank you.
So we do want to talk about your experiences in the service and what happened before, after, during. But first, what's your connection with Newton?
I came here when I was about 3 years old because my father taught at the Old Day Junior High School. And we lived on, well, actually we lived on Washington Street very briefly, and then we lived on Cherry Street over near the Waltham line.
Right.
And then my father built a house in West Newton on a recently developed street in that area. It was interesting, the streets, we lived on Bird Avenue, and the parallel street around the corner was Lindbergh.
Oh.
And I never quite understood why the street at the end was named Rose, but it was Margaret Rose and Lindbergh and Bird, and that was the era in which that street developed. And from there, I started in the Newton schools.
So where did you go for elementary?
Well, I went to Davis School, went home for lunch in those days,
Right.
and then continued in the Newton schools. I didn't go to day. I was right on the borderline, and we thought that because my father was at day, it would be better if I went to Warren. And then from there, I went to Newton High School. I graduated from Newton High School in, what year, 1945.
Okay, great. So you have a long-time relationship with Newton.
Yes.
Okay. Were you in Newton before you entered the service?
Yeah, well, I graduated from Newton High School.
Right, and
in,
then you stayed.
45, June, and I was drafted and went into the service in July of that 45. So yes, I was living in Newton, living with my family. Graduated from high school, actually had applied to and been accepted by a college, but then was drafted and went into the service immediately.
Wow.
And if people remember the dates, I went into basic training down in Florida, and about the 8th week of basic training was in August,
Right.
and the war in Japan was over, and that's when they dropped the bombs on Nagasaki. And we were being trained at that time. We had bamboo huts, as it were, and we were learning how to attack Japanese soldiers in bamboo huts. And then when they declared that the war was over, we stopped training that day as of 1 o'clock or something. And then when we came back the next day, they said, "You guys are not going to go to Japan and capture bamboo huts.
Right.
The word is you guys are going to go to Europe and relieve the guys that have been sitting over there, because the war over there has been over for about 6 months, and so you're going to be doing that, and we have no training program for whatever you're going to be doing then."
Oh,
So
okay.
they told us, like, lie down and look like you're learning something, and if we see any brass coming, we'll blow a whistle and everybody look busy. But we did go through a lot of the training. We still marched and shot rifles and learned about weapons and so on. We just didn't practice fighting Japanese soldiers.
Right.
And then after that, about I remember very well, Thanksgiving 1945, I arrived home to have Thanksgiving dinner with my family here in Newton, and then reported back to Fort Dix in New Jersey and was sent overseas, and arrived in Le Havre on Christmas Day of 1945. And that was the beginning of my overseas duty.
Okay. So how old were you exactly at
18
that time?
at that
You were
time.
18 years old?
Yeah, 18 in April before I graduated and continued to be 18.
So what branch of the military did they put you in?
Well, no, we were in the Army.
Yes.
I was assigned to a couple of different divisions, but finally ended up with the 7th, 8th Division, which had been prominent in the capture of the bridge at Remagen
Right,
and some of
right.
that. I saw no combat. That, I don't know where you want to go with the rest of that, but that
Yeah.
was a very interesting time for me, and frankly, a very pleasant military duty.
Really? That's great. What was it like when you got there?
Oh. We came in, first of all, we're on a couple of literally box cars, 40 and 8s, and we got moved around a couple of times, and we arrived on New Year's Eve in a town they tell me was Neustadt, which means new town. I think there must be a million Neustadts, but that was a place which had been used for a Nazi youth training camp. And they had bunk beds and showers and so on. And we were riding in this boxcar, and it was cold. Mm-hmm. And we had our sleeping bags and our packs on our back. And the idea on this sleeping bag was to roll them up very, very tight so they didn't flop apart. And once you rolled it up that tight, you're really reluctant to undo it.
Sure.
And it was colder and colder. And finally, I got up to go to the bathroom, and I heard all this banging on the walls, and the guys are yelling, "Happy New Year's." And I thought, I can't stand this anymore. I've got to unpack the sleeping bag. So about 2 o'clock in the morning, I unrolled the sleeping bag, broke the tape, got it out. 4 a.m. in the morning, they said, "We're here now." And we got out, and it was so cold out there. And they said, "We're going up to that place over there. You'll see some building in the short distance." So we went over there. I was never very ahead of the line in the service, but that was the one time I was there. I was so cold, I was running up there. But they put us there briefly so we could get showered, and we got some food. Mm-hmm. Really not very luxurious, but compared to what we'd been through in the boxcar, it was very pleasant for us. Didn't have to do anything particular.
Right.
And then they put us in another boxcar, and we didn't know where we were going. And we spent another day or so, and I woke up in the morning and looked out, and it looked like a suburban area or something. And we called out and we said, "Where are we?" Mm-hmm. And some of the fellows were Jewish, and so they spoke Yiddish, and that was enough so that they could communicate.
I understand the German.
And somebody said, "Schlachtensee." He said, "What the heck is that?" What town are we in? "Berlin." "Hey guys, we're in Berlin."
Really?
Well, terrific. So that's when I said we had a good experience, because we then were broken very quickly into groups and went out to, would be very comparable to Newton, Waltham, probably a little more like Newton, quite frankly.
Really pretty suburban.
Yeah. Victorian houses, kind of, which had been commandeered, and a bunch of them would be like taking a group of a set of houses in West Newton or something, and then they just put bunks into the dining room, living room, or whatever you want to call it, and we got housed in there. And the thing that was good about it was that eventually we found out that we'd all gone through basic training together.
Right.
And so we were always Yankees in Southern culture, or exposed to it, and really surprised us they had separate eating and drinking for blacks and colors and white, as they had on the window. And that had been somewhat of a revelation. And the people who trained us were heavily from the South. But we were all Northerners together. But then when we got into Berlin, they began to break us up more and put us in different kinds of outfits. And I remember the thing of the story I love to tell. We went into one of these rooms where they had hacked together some bunk beds, and I went there, and there wasn't much of anybody else with me. I was assigned there, and I grabbed one of the bunk beds, and the Army issued a pocket, or like paperbacks, but they had their own. And I'm lying there looking at it and wondering what's going to happen next. Another soldier came in. Oh, very good. He said, "Hi, I'm Arthur Pillins. Who be you?" I said, "Well, my name's Bob Reed." He said, "Well, what you doing? Reading a book?" So Arthur and I hit it off. I drew some guard duty and down to the Reichskanzlei where Hitler died, and Brandenburger Gate with the chariot on the top of the gate. So we were down there guarding that stuff which was being sorted by military and civilian hirees. And then sometimes I would have guard duty just outside, and there were, in those days, Berlin was divided into four sectors: French sector, English sector, Russian sector,
Right.
and American sector. But if you know that or don't know it, the whole of Germany was divided into four sectors. And Berlin was in the middle of the Russian sector. So we were in the American sector of quadripartite Berlin, in the middle of the Russian sector of quadripartite Germany. And that was a little bit of a problem because we couldn't get in and out easily. There was a road and a train. The train came in and out once a day. The road was guarded by Russians all the way along. The trucks were searched and it was controlled. So we didn't move around very much, but we didn't really have to, because Berlin was so rich at that period of time that it's kind of a pun. You know, the music scene never missed a beat. Like here we were, like 6 months, 5 months after the war was over. There were chamber music, symphony concerts, 2 opera houses, all kinds of amenities, a circus, a racetrack, all that still going on in the city.
Right.
But when you said, what did it look like when I got there? After that, we traveled a little bit in other parts of Europe, and there was no city that could come even close to the devastation of Berlin. Our bombing had taken that down right flat. And what we saw in general was these wiped out blocks of buildings, just flat, and crews of German men and women picking up, chipping the cement off bricks and stacking them. And they had them on little carts and cleaning up the rubble. That's what they had to do. And I think that if they didn't do that, they wouldn't get a meal ticket. And they had a serious problem for food at that time. We didn't have trouble, but they did. And I don't know what to say about that.
Were they working with for the American sector or the Russians? Is it the Russians that made them do that? Do you know?
I think that was universal.
That was
it was
universal.
a quadripartite government. OMDUS, Office of Military Government, U.S.
Right.
And there was a collaborative leadership on the part.
Right.
But it was also apparent to us, we would see trains, railroad trains going out with all kinds of machinery, occasionally our jeeps going back to Russia, that they were looting the country at that time.
And you could see that.
At that. And
did you have other interaction with the Russians?
well, I got digressed because I was talking about pulling guard duty, and we would see the Russians over there. And we talked with them a little bit, but it was mostly hand signals and things like that. But we saw the Russians around, and in those days, this was before the Berlin Wall went up. And so we flowed easily from one section to the other, and you would see Russians, and so you had some contact with them. We had a lot of contact with the British and some with the French.
Right.
So it was pretty, in those days, fairly friendly relationships.
Okay. And were you aware of what really, you said the rubble and destruction, any interaction with the civilian population?
Oh, yes.
Did you have duties related to that?
All kinds of, first of all, I want to say in general, we had marvelous relationships with them, and they had marvelous relations with us, if for no other reason than because we weren't the Russians.
Right.
If you know, before that time, if you read novels and reports of that time, they were scared to death, rightly so,
Yes.
of invasion by the Russians, and there were mass rapes that transpired at that time. So they were pretty friendly with us, and I must say, I don't know, maybe I was friendly with somebody who was a Nazi executioner or something, but our actions were friendly, and it was one of the places where I eventually was stationed, assigned, was in a big complex comparable to a GE headquarters. Mm-hmm. And the person who ran it was a German man. He had before, and he was then. And then we had a German lady who came around. I have a picture in my photo book of her picking up our laundry for us. And the thing, I have to go back a little bit. When I was pulling the guard duty, they eventually, I got a call one day. I'd been there maybe 2 months. I was supposed to be a light machine gunner in an infantry company, but I pulled guard duty just with a rifle or something. And I'm back in the room with Arthur Pippins in the bunk, and somebody says they want you up at BD, Berlin District Headquarters. What have I done now? I said, what's the other? Don't ask questions, soldier, just go what you're told. So I went up to BD headquarters. As I said, we'd been out in these suburban homes. It was all right, but
yeah.
Okay. And boy, it was nice. And they said, well, it's just about lunchtime. And they said, the reason you're here, soldier, is that we're setting up a school, actually under the aegis of the civilian office, what do they call them? Civilian civilian employees, the military.
Right.
And this man had a uniform kind of looking outfit, but with no insignia on it,
right.
No rank, no nothing. And he said, we're looking for people to staff the school. And by implication, we might like to have you do that. Well, I thought, this sounds kind of interesting, a lot better than walking around at night looking at Russians. So they said, but it's time for lunch. So, want to eat lunch? So I went over to a single-story, large building in the middle of the complex, and we went in. And there were young German girls in little black uniforms with little white caps on. And people are kind of standing in line, but we eventually sit down, and the little capped matrons come along and ask you if there's a couple of choices. Do you want coffee or tea? Is there anything on the menu, which is this little piece of paper, that you don't want? And pretty, I'm better than standing in a quote chow line. So that was nice. And then they said something like, do you want to have some soup? Yeah, well, anybody can have soup. There's a big vat of soup here. And we do pretty well because the cooks we have are not army cooks. They're German hotel cooks that are cooking for us. And the food was much better than ordinary army food.
Sure.
And they talked some more. That was pretty delightful. And they talked some more and said, would you like to teach school? Who's going to go to the school?
Right.
Well, not Germans. This is for GIs who didn't have a fifth grade education, and also GIs who would like to have a high school education.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I became a teacher. I don't know why. They give you a AGCT, which is the Army. It's like an IQ test.
Right.
I scored well on that. And must have said someplace that I wanted to be a teacher or something. Only explanation I can think of. I was just a high school grad. What was I doing here? But it was good. They put us in this industrial complex type of thing GE, and we had some rooms which maybe were offices before. We had a suite of rooms for half a dozen GI teachers, like myself. We were on what they call detached service. We got little or no recognition from our 78th Division company. On the other hand, if we didn't bother them, they wouldn't bother us.
Right.
So it was really kind of like being in a college dorm. We were decent people. We kept the place fairly clean.
Right.
And did what we wanted to. And if we weren't teaching a class, we had a pass in those days to let you go all over the city. And so we would go to these events that I mentioned, go to the opera, go to a concert. We would go to German, we'd see American films with German dubbing on them. So we did that. We did a number of recreational things. I often think, that the Russians, when they cut the city up, they have the big industrial part of the city.
Right.
And the British got a big section of general business in downtown and so on. And the French got a little sliver of not much of anything because they were persona non grata. And the Americans got the recreational part of it.
Interesting.
And we were out at Vonza, which would be kind of like Cape Cod. There was a lake and summer homes there and so on. So
Right.
So we were there. And so, as I said, we had a very nice duty. We taught our classes, and when we didn't teach our classes, we kind of did what we wanted to do.
How many people were in your classes? And
Relatively few, and this is the kicker. One of them was Arthur Pippin's.
really?
So, and furthermore, Arthur Pippin's outranked me because we weren't part of the regular company, so they weren't giving us any rank or anything else. You come back to the company, you can be sergeant or corporal, but Arthur Pippin stayed with the company and he got to be a corporal.
Oh, really?
But that was just a little sidelight. But it was amazing to me that we did have a large number of people, American soldiers. Oh, and the other thing was the staffing of it. Who was teaching them?
Yes.
Well, obviously the people that I mentioned were teaching it. Then the civilians who would come over to set up the school, some of them taught. And the rest of the teachers were German nationals in Berlin, delighted to work for the American government, teaching American GIs how to read, write, and spell.
And math,
and when you asked, do we have good relationships? Yeah, we had good relationships with those people.
Interesting. That's interesting. So there was no recognition among the GIs about what these people may have been involved in. Did the Army do anything to educate you or prepare you for some of...
Let me think about it. It doesn't come to my mind particularly.
I'm just curious if you had any interactions that, made you aware of...
In those days, we were allowed to fraternize. There was not a ban against fraternizing. Right. We probably got some kind of a lecture or two, but no, that was not a major issue.
Okay.
Both of us kind of liked working with each other.
Right.
One of the things that happened, where I spent a lot of time, the Army had service clubs, what do they call it? USOs, United Service.
Right.
But the American Red Cross ran clubs. They were kind of in competition with each other. I don't understand exactly how that worked out. And there were Red Cross club mobiles that would go out actually in areas where people were training or fighting or something and open up the side door and serve coffee and donuts. But they also had clubs in town. As a matter of fact, in Berlin, I think I think there were 4 or 5 in Berlin alone. And they're kind of like a neighborhood club. That is, they would have a little coffee place. They would have activities. They would have trivia night. And furthermore, they would put on events. One year they put on a 4th of July. That was good for the Germans. And the Germans were there staffing the fishing pool and the guess the beans and all of that kind of thing.
Sure.
Once again, I had very good relationships. I was friendly with a couple of the club directors, and they had German assistants who became very fond of each other. So that was the kind of the ambience of the occupational army. After we left, well, I think they began to tighten up and get more regular army-ish. So it was a wonderful time during that middle period of transition.
How long were you teaching in the service?
Well, I was overseas. I said that I had Thanksgiving dinner with my family, and I returned. I was discharged early, convenience of the government. So I was in the Army something like 16, 17 months.
Oh.
And just thinking that 16 or 17 months, of which 4 or 5 were basic training. And so I arrived home in time for Thanksgiving of 1946.
Right.
And as I say, I was technically in the Army for another month, but I was at home by that time. And
how did you keep in touch with the family while you were in Europe?
Good question. We wrote letters, but in this marvelous mess hall. I think the peak of my military experience was the mess hall.
Of course. At 18, I could understand.
There was a telegraph office, as it were. And I never thought about it, but I think it was a fountain pen. Who knows? So whenever we came in, we could send a message home. We didn't usually do that. But one day I wrote a message and said, I need a fountain pen. Send me a fountain pen. Well, my mother told me on the other end, they get this call from the military government that your son in Germany has sent you a telegram.
Oh, my goodness.
Going through their minds.
Of course.
Send me a pen. I would say more we wrote letters back and forth, fairly decently.
Yeah. So it was easy.
And
people weren't homesick. It doesn't sound like you had that experience of being homesick.
Well, that's interesting. No, I don't think so. I think maybe if you were homesick, they got homesick in basic training.
Yeah, more than when they went to Europe.
Yeah. And it was a great time. One of the things that happened, shortly after we were there, about the time that I was going to teach school, some of the fellows who were with me, and one of them, whose name is fairly well known here in Newton, is Johnny Recco. Johnny Recco was the all-star multi-sports hero. He played baseball extremely well. Matter of fact, was picked up by the Red Sox. Never made anything out of it, but was picked up by the Red Sox. He also played hockey. He played basketball. And he was a very nice guy. And in those days, Newton High School put us in our homerooms by alphabet.
Right.
So Reed and Recco had been together for a long time, and Johnny was overseas, and he ran into a fellow, and he said, are you so-and-so? He said, did you play hockey for Arlington High School? He says, yeah. You're that guy who played for Newton, right? He said, yeah. He says, the old GBI League, we're all over here together. Arlington, Belmont, Melrose.
Interesting.
He says, you ought to get with us. So, and I guess one of the coaches was somebody from there, so the old GBI Basketball League became the Berlin hockey team and did extremely well. They played against Finland, they played against other military groups. And it was the old Newton and Suburban
That's
League
amazing.
sports. So,
Really exciting.
yeah.
Wow. So it doesn't sound like they were really homesick. They were
No,
having a good time.
I think they replicated home overseas, I think.
So mostly you felt it was positive experiences you had? Was there anything else memorable about your time there or in the service?
Well, I suppose there were many memorable things about that, little incidents and anecdotes. I would say, as I said right at the beginning, I had a good, you could never bet on it, another
Right.
time it wouldn't necessarily happen
right.
that way. But it was a great experience for me. One of the things we did, three of us hired a German who used to work for the German State Department of Government to tutor us in some German. That was nice. And then when I came back, German was my language for college and things like that.
Interesting. So it
And
really
we-
did have an impact
Yes,
later
it
on.
had a lifelong impact. And then I used GI Bill I had a small scholarship when I graduated from high school, and that plus the GI Bill got me through my undergrad work, and I had enough left over, so I also paid for most of my master's
Wow.
with the GI Bill. I continued to get medical services from the VA, both my prescription drugs and a couple of my specialists.
So where did...
The Army has been very good to me.
No, that's great. It's good to hear. So the return to civilian life was pretty smooth, applying
Yeah,
for
no,
schools, and had you applied to school before you got drafted?
Yeah, I had been accepted at base before then. And then when I got out at Thanksgiving, it would be logical to go back to a second semester.
Right.
But base, and some colleges did in those days, because the GIs were coming back, you could start in the middle of the year and go in the summer, a month or another. Base was not such a school, so I went to BU kind of at the last minute. My father knew somebody and went in and talked to someone. They said, well, you can come here if you want, or you got to register tomorrow. And I said, what's the hurry? They said, classes start the day after tomorrow. So and I never left BU. I stayed and graduated from BU as a result of that. I'm sorry, I lost track of the question.
No, that was fine. Just what the transition was like,
yeah.
what you did afterward, and what did you major in later on? You mentioned you took
well,
German. German was your language, but
I mean, so one other thing was, Mark, everybody, all the students, BU prospered at that time. That's when they built their new campus and things like that. But everybody was in Army garb, Army field jackets, Army coats, Army this, that, and the other thing. A lot of GIs wearing leftovers. And I applied, the contact my father had was with the State Department of Education, so I applied to the School of Ed. And then after about 2 years, I met with my advisor, and she confronted me with the fact that I wasn't taking a lot of the required basic ed courses. That I was going to be taking quite a few English courses. And I remember very well Mary Agnella Gone. She said, Mr. Reed, you don't have principles of education here. I said, well, I'm going to take that eventually. I said, but right now I thought it would be important as an English teacher to have a good background in English. Well, Mr. Reed, if you think English is what is important, maybe you should be in the College of Liberal Arts rather than here in the School of Ed. And I said, I think you're right, and I transferred to the
did you really?
I still continue to get my teaching background certificate, but I graduated from Liberal Arts at that time.
And did you end up teaching English?
Yes. I took some courses, and then eventually I ended up doing practice teaching out here at Wellesley. And I am quick to say that one of my students was Sylvia Plath.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
And I also want to say somewhat facetiously, the poor girl couldn't write a sentence until I got a hold of her.
So you
That's not true. She was very sharp. She was publishing in those days.
even then,
And they
right?
had they didn't have AP courses in those days, but all the heavy-hitting students ended up with Will Crockett's English class, and they socialized together on one thing or another, and so I was his student teacher, a wonderful experience.
Wow, that's
And
great.
Sylvia and some of those other people were in that class, and he and I were responsible for directing the senior play, and Sylvia was in the senior play, so we had some contact there.
Interesting.
So yeah, and then from there I went on and became an English teacher in Attleboro. Mm-hmm. How much more do you want?
No, it's interesting. So do you feel that teaching in Germany all those years ago made an impact on what you wanted
Well,
to do? Did
probably,
it influence you
but
later?
as I said, I was pretty much headed in that direction anyhow.
Right.
So.
It sort of went to your interests
Yeah.
at the time. That's great. Did you ever return to Germany?
Yes, 2 or 3 times. I'm very fond of Germany still. I like that. And I ended up eventually going back to BU and getting a doctorate from BU. And the doctorate I got there was in something called counselor education. And what had happened during that period of time was that school guidance counselors had emerged as a field, a certification area, and so on.
Right.
And what I had done with what was left, I said I had some time left on my GI Bill, so I didn't want to waste it. And the word was, well, they're not going to extend it. You have to use it, or you're going to lose it.
Right.
That was not true, but that's what they said. And so I got about half of my master's out of the GI Bill, and my master's was in this new thing called guidance work, which was a little stronger in other parts of the country than it was here. So someplace along the way I emerged as a guidance counselor and then a guidance director and other related areas, got into a little bit of college work, went back to BU, and BU, in the meanwhile, had generated a program under the Department of Defense of providing master's degrees to Americans, once again, not German, but to Americans, civilian workers for Deere Tractor or whatever, and military personnel and their spouses. They had a school program in, as I remember, approximately 20 areas of, and there were 2 in Italy, I think 1 in Brussels, and the rest of them all in Germany.
So Western Europe, right.
And what would happen was that BU would have a secretary, and they would have 2 or 3 apartment houses, and then faculty would go overseas, supposedly from BU,
Right.
but a lot of BU people didn't want to go, and besides staffing all 20 of these was quite large, so they would draft people from any place they could to teach in these master's degree programs, so that let's say if you were in the Army and you were what they call a 20-year man, that means you could get a half pension.
Right.
At the age of 39, 41, 42, you could graduate, you had a master's in guidance counseling, and you could get out and get a job in civilian life, and variations on that theme.
Right.
And so we would spend 1 semester in one area, in my case Heidelberg, and then the second semester we would go to another place, in my case Zurich, and we would do that. And then furthermore, the one in Zurich he taught during the summer, and it was very comparable to what we have here. The students were all working in the daytime or in active duty,
okay.
so there were late afternoon, evening classes, and
right.
during the daytime we were free. Even better than living in the
Sure.
in the General Electric. Telefunken was another place.
Did you go with your family at that
Yeah,
time?
took our family. My wife was a speech therapist. She, at that time, she eventually did some college teaching. That was one of the hardest parts of it, because she felt that she was kind of abandoning her career. And then the two children were elementary school age, so.
Yeah, but that must have been a great
Yeah,
experience for
so that
them.
was a good experience for all of us, and we skied and we went around and
Sounds
so on.
amazing. So we're going to be wrapping up in a minute or two. This has been amazing. Is there any message you'd like to sort of put on tape for people looking at this 100 years from now or later on about your time in the military?
I came to be interviewed, not to be profound. Profound.
Just any last thought to leave us with? It doesn't have to be that profound.
Well, I relative to what we're saying here, when I was a guidance counselor, and since then, I do continue to have this thought, and not just because of the program's affiliation with the veterans. The military is not the right answer for everyone in any means, but it's a terrific way out and up.
Right.
And if a lot of other doors are closed to you and you don't know what to do, and you know, you can go in for 20 years, you can go in for make a career of it. The military emphasizes education now in their recruiting, not killing people, but education.
Right.
And for a lot of people, it's a terrific opportunity to break the mold and move. The fact that all the GIs, you know, what happened with the GIs in general was that they were all moving on the track, post-depression track, they weren't going much of it. And all of a sudden they were pulled out of there, they met new people, maybe they got some courses, they broke the chain.
Right.
And we created a whole wonderful society, I think, in those years after that. So there's a message there for the individual, but there's a message there for us as a country that this is a pretty good opportunity, and if you hadn't thought about it before, you ought to think about it a little bit.
That's great. You should work as a recruiter because it's very effective. Your story was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for participating in this project, volunteering and coming to speak with us.
Well, thank you.
We
for
really
inviting me.
appreciate that. It's been amazing, really interesting.